Well, hello, everyone. My name is Michael McCormick, and you are listening to the Superintendent Hot Seat, where bold superintendent leaders share their real stories behind their most difficult challenges and decisions as they work to improve overall student safety, wellness, and attendance in a system not yet fully prepared to support those entering our schools. In today's episode, I am delighted to have a good friend and colleague, David Olney. Welcome to the show, David.
Good morning, Mike. It's great to see you.
Hey, likewise. So we're going to dive right into the first question here, which is if you had to rethink this whole idea of student wellness, considering the stress, the anxiety, the bullying, all the stuff that's going on, not only for the kids, but the adults in your system and the broader community. What would that look like, sound like, and feel like for you?
You know, I tell you, I think first of all, before I even address the question, I love the fact that you bring the adults into this. And one of the things that I'm real proud of in this area is we created this, worked with a gentleman by the name of Dr. Ron Powell, directed this wellness framework. And we were in a meeting a few years ago, and just sitting there having this conversation about student wellness. It was a robust conversation, really talking about it from a systemic perspective. And I interrupted Dr. Powell at one point, and I just said, Ron, and I've known him for years. I said, Ron, I don't want to take us off track. And we're talking about great things for kids, but what are we also doing for the adults? And so I really appreciate the fact that you did bring up the adults, because the reality of this is, you know, our teachers, our counselors, our administrators, they're on the front lines of working day in, day out. And if we don't address their wellness, they're not going to be able to address the wellness of our students. And so I think really it is kind of approaching this from a systemic piece. And really it comes down to relationships. It comes down to communication. And, you know, I'm a big fan of Margaret Wheatley. And I think one of the things that she says, you know, I believe we can change the world if we just start listening to one another again. And I think a lot of times with wellness, the problem is we're looking again for a silver bullet. We're looking for a program in a box. And the fact is that does not typically happen. It comes back down to listening to one another and getting to understand one another. I think it's very, very frustrating that, you know, with what's going on in today's society, I think something like 20% of Americans are suffering from chronic loneliness. And I think there's a whole number of factors about that. You know, we've got to come back together, begin to have those conversations, begin to understand one another. And I think students need that. And this hasn't been something that is, you know, all of a sudden it's an issue. This has been an issue for a long period of time. And certainly the pandemic has exacerbated that. I think social media has. I mean, I think that there's a number of factors. But at the end of the day, our students need to be heard. And so the adults, right?
Yeah, I think that's I think you're onto something. And I too am a fan of Margaret Wheatley, especially her ideas and thoughts around change. Mm-hmm. But you know, the way I would kind of encapsulate what you were talking about is a sense of belonging. I think the adults need to feel a sense of belonging as well. And a lot of our energies in schooling and systems, we've always kind of put students first, which is what we should do. I mean, I'm not bashing that at all. But I think we're in a profession, a calling, an advocation where we show up to work every day to be in service. And the adults in the system have to have their cup filled too. And I think for teachers, it goes deeper than that. One of the things I've been spending some time thinking about lately is that, do teachers really have a voice at the table where the big decisions are made? And when teachers, at least in my experience, when teachers feel like they've truly got a seat at the table, they're engaged in making decisions, it's this concept that those are closest to the work should be leading and guiding the work. What are some of the things that you've been thinking about in your school system to really engage the teachers and the support staff in those decision-making processes that provide a sense of belonging uh, for them?
That's such a powerful statement and a powerful question as well. And I think going back, this is my 8th year being the superintendent of Hesperia Unified School District, and one of the things coming in, I'm a big fan of Michael Fullen, and we really talked a lot about the whole notion of coherence, right? And in terms of leadership, what does that mean? He has that concept of leading from the middle. And leading from the middle really is rolling up the sleeves and sitting down with those frontline folks, with those practitioners, being able to have the conversations. It's about deep dialogue. And again, it's going to go back to what we started with that deep listening, right? We need to be able to engage in those conversations. The only way that you effectively change a system is for the system to actually see itself. In order for it to see itself, you have to engage in dialogue. One of the things that we did is we kind of started, 8 years ago about, okay, what truly is our focus? And, look, when you're dealing with kids, you want to do everything for kids, right? And so it's very easy to have, areas of focus all over the place. And, if you're trying to focus on everything, you're actually focusing on nothing. And so really kind of keying in what are those needs that we really need to focus on right now? And now let's put structures in place where we can actually have colleagues, having conversations with one another that involves, from our teachers on the front lines to our site administrators to our district leaders to our classified employees. Are we sitting down, having those conversations, and then being able to truly have intentional conversations on what we're trying to do as a system, which is best serve our students so that they can be a part of our community. I'm really proud of the work that we've done here, and I know a lot of superintendents will say that, but I knew this was going to be a long process, and of course we had the pandemic in the middle of it, which was really frustrating. But I would tell you, after that first year, you started to hear staff having this conversation using the vocabulary, the verbiage of coherence. And you could see that it was starting to sink in because we were really embracing the dialogue, the conversations. That second year, again, it was starting to spread out. I remember we were in a meeting, and one of the site administrators made the comment, and I think we're probably mid-year, second year, and he goes, "The thing that's just so amazing is that everybody's using the same verbiage, right? We're having that coherent dialogue, and it just made my heart warm." And here we were in 2020. We were really focusing on addressing student needs, on really developing deep levels of literacy, and then all of a sudden the world shut down. And it was the first time, Mike, in my career where I had teachers and principals who were upset that they were not going to be involved in state testing. They were so just focused on the work that they were doing and so convinced that they were going to see continued growth. And then all of a sudden, everything just shut down.
Yeah. Pulled the rug right out from underneath us.
Yeah.
I know, it's crazy. I heard we did a lot of work in my former district with labor management relations. And one of the things that always stood out to me was kind of this philosophy that together we want to become a listening, learning organization. And it actually sounds like it's right out of Margaret Wheatley's, mouth. But it's this idea that there's systems and structures in place for regular collaboration. And I think that's where districts sometimes fall a little short. I think the inspiration is there and the desire is there to have regular collaborative time built in at the highest levels of the organization. But I don't know that people always take the next step to actually calendar those regular conversations or get-togethers where the kind of work that you're talking about that you've been so proud of facilitating in Hesperia. And so what kind of advice might you share with superintendent colleagues about kind of taking that next step and taking this from a conversation to real action in terms of doing just that? Maybe the first step is actually calendaring the dates across the year, so you're coming in for those regular check-ins. Go ahead, take it away.
Well, I think you hit the nail right on the head, and it is being very, very intentional. I think first of all, you have to know, I think, as a superintendent, and fortunately in Hesperia, this is my 37th year in education. 28 of those years have been in Hesperia. The last 8 as superintendent. So I had 20 years within the district prior to that happening, right? And so I think kind of having a sense of where are we as a district. If I'm going into a school district, obviously that old adage of don't do anything in that first year, just Lao Tzu says live with the people, love the people, and in the end they'll know that they've done it themselves. But I think it's really understanding where are we as a district, and let's be real intentional about what we're trying to accomplish. And then we have to develop those structures. So, PLCs are, the work of DeFore is incredible, and it's very powerful when you bring a team of teachers together to actually have dialogue. Unfortunately, sometimes it becomes PLC light, and it's just, okay, we're just doing the basic work, surface level. We're not going deep. But it also becomes isolated and it becomes siloed. So what we have to be able to do is put those structures that are going to get those PLCs talking together in a larger context. And then it is among schools to where you're going to have the ability to dialogue, whether that happens to be groups of elementary schools, or we've done both, where we've had cohorts of elementary schools, or we've done vertical, where we've had elementary feeder patterns into middle school and high school. I think I was talking about that second year, and one of the coolest comments that I ever got from a high school principal was when he was sharing with me what he had learned from an elementary principal, and he was now putting into practice at the high school. I had never heard that before, because again, the high school was kind of that exclusive club, right? And they're in their own little world. So it really is creating those structures. And then, as you said, you've got to calendar those dates, and you have to be intentional about the conversation. And then there's a lot of back work that goes with that as well. We have to, really work with our leaders of how not to dominate the conversation. How is it that we, develop inquiry skills, that we're actually asking questions that get people talking, and that we're listening at deeper levels, not just at the surface, but, getting in between the lines, so that conversation becomes more generative, and we're actually creating something that is going to be powerful moving forward. And then, of course, it's, for our district, we have, obviously PLCs. We've been a PLC district for many, many years. We have what we call site leadership teams, which is comprised of teachers, and we've added classified employees here and there in that as well. And they meet with their cohorts, so it's among schools. And then we have an instructional leadership team, which really focuses on developing those leadership skills to be able to engage staff in good, productive dialogue. And then we have a district leadership team. And, part of that is going to be taking a look at data. How well are we actually operating? How are we making progress? And so it really is intentional. It's structured. And I think what we found anyway is that the more the dialogue was occurring, data was no longer a bad word. It was, let's take a look at this. Now, what can we do about it? Hey, let's try this. And we got away from, let's put in a program. We really looked into what's working with our students and what are the areas that we still need to focus on.
Yeah, beautifully said. And I think, just to kind of circle back for the audience, the reason that I believe these conversations are so important is it's about creating a sense of belonging and a sense of investment at every level of the organization so that the adults are certain about the organizational mission. And in schools, that organizational mission is about supporting one another and ultimately supporting our students and the communities that we serve. And so, human beings are not robots. And there's lots of emotions that come into, particularly around change. And so when we're trying to affect some sort of change, we have to create the psychological safety throughout the system in order for people to be willing to take a chance and try something different and know that there's not going to be the repercussions that may have been in some of the legacy systems. And so that's why I think I just wanted to restate that, because it's a nuanced conversation. And David, you're spot on with this stuff. It's kind of like, how can we get the adults feeling a sense of belonging and connected to the organization? And that really does drive coherence. Well, we're about halfway through the podcast already. And so we're going to take a little pause here and continue this amazing conversation after a quick 30-second message from our producer, Muzoom, a company rethinking student wellness with bite-sized, Netflix-style behavior modeling videos where students can watch peers facing similar challenges and gain fresh perspectives on resolution. It's the only SEL platform that's truly click and play, enabling teachers to deliver a full SEL lesson in 15 minutes or less.
Creating a safe, supportive environment is key to our learners' success. With nearly every district prioritizing social-emotional well-being to reduce suspension rates, decrease chronic absenteeism, and improve academic performance, the challenge is how to achieve this without adding to your staff's workload. Discover Muzoom, a groundbreaking student-driven platform that uses real-world choose-your-own-adventure bite-sized movies to make SEL engaging for students, easy for teachers to teach, and more cost-effective for districts to implement. Check out Muzoom today.
Sign up today for 30 days of unlimited Muzoom access, absolutely free. Just go to muzoomapp.com/SHS. That's MOOZOOMAPP.com/SHS.
All right, we're back with today's guest on the podcast, Superintendent Hot Seat. David Olney is with us. David, there's some big news ahead for you. Tell us what's going on.
Oh, Mike, I'm in the final 2 months of my career. After 37 years, I'm fortunate enough to be in a position to where my wife gets me back. So
right on.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. So retirement is on the horizon. And when I was kind of thinking about that, my mantra was, I'm going to finish strong.
Absolutely.
And I believe your philosophy is the same. You're going to finish strong. You've been in service to the community for almost 3 decades. And how are you feeling about that? And I want to go deep with you on this, because I'm a recent retiree. Yeah. And boy, my head was all over the parking lot. So what are some of your initial thoughts?
It's funny because I think, I knew going into this year, and as my board did as well, that this was going to be the year. And I think for a majority of this school year, it's hard to believe that, May starts this week. But it really was still kind of surreal. And, when you've been doing something this long, and, I always said one of the best compliments I ever got, it was from a coach in another district that I worked in briefly. And he said, Dave, the thing I like about you is you're all in. And I think the problem when you're all in, and Mike, I know, because I know you get this, is there are people that pay the price for that. And that typically is our family. And so, again, I agree with you. I think finishing strong, that's exactly in my mindset. It's like, no, we're going to do what's right for this school district. I was here at 6:45 this morning, raring to go, and we're going to continue. But I will say the last probably 4 to 6 weeks, it's become a little bit more real. And we're truly blessed. Back in January, when I made the formal announcement, the board also made the decision for my successor. And she is an absolute amazing educator, and she is going to do a terrific job. I have to tell you, it took a lot of weight right off of my shoulders. And so I'm really excited about that. But, this is that time of year where you start to think about next year, right?
That's right.
And so, I'll be in the middle of a meeting and we need to, well, wait a second, I'm not going to be here, but I still believe that we need to. And so, it has become a little bit more real. But
for those that don't know, I mean, in education, this is the time of the year where you've got one foot in the current school year and one foot in the next school year, and all of that planning is starting to happen.
Yeah.
And so, I very much had similar thoughts. It was about this time, I was excited for graduations and all the end of the year celebrations. But at the same time, those conversations were starting to, get going about budget, facilities, instruction, starting to lay out, okay, what are our goals going to be for where we, where ed services is going to take things, and and all those kinds of conversations. But I will say this, just switching gears ever so slightly, you and I have had kind of a parallel path in that we've served in a school district for many, many years. And one of the things that literally, David, brought me to tears on multiple occasions was people started coming out and saying, and the conversation always started like this: you probably don't remember, but you had a conversation with me 20 years ago, and it set me on a different course, or it made me think about this, and one of the nice things about hanging out in one system for so many years is I believe you actually get to hear some of that feedback on people's lives that you've impacted along the way. And to me, that's one of the most beautiful things about our career and our chosen profession, is that if you do get to if you are fortunate enough to hang out in one place for this long, you get that feedback, which seldom comes in education. So I hope I've teed this up, because we haven't talked about this ahead of time, but I hope you've had at least one person stop you and say, you might not remember this, but take it from there.
It's funny is, again, 37 years. I started my career teaching in Riverside from UCO. Became a teacher there for Riverside Unified School District. And then my wife and I decided to move up into the high desert. At that time, it was one of the areas that I could afford a house. And so we bought a house, and I commuted for a little while, but then came up here and started teaching. And I've been a teacher and administrator. Left for 5 years, went down to the county, was the superintendent of a very small school district for 3, and then came back. And just being in the general area, the Inland Empire, I mean, and the Mountain Desert region of San Bernardino County, I think, you develop those relationships. So obviously in Hesperia, being there for 28 years, my director of elementary education is a former student of mine. She was, she was a 7th grader in my English class, at Hesperia Junior High School. So, you have those connections. One of the coolest ones I had in the past number of years, probably about 5 years ago or so, I had a young man. I was at a back to school night at one of our elementary schools, and he walked up to me and he goes, "Excuse me," he says, "Are you the Mr. Olney that used to teach in Riverside?" And I said, "Yeah, my hair's a lot grayer now, but yeah, that was me." He goes, "I became a teacher because of you." And, you have those kind of connections. And so that wasn't just within the district. And certainly I've had those as well. Mike, and you know this, the hardest part about making this decision, because, I probably still have a few good years left in me. But as I said, my commitment's got to be to my wife right now. I've got a grandbaby coming, or actually already in. She turns 2 in May. I want to spend time with my kids and my grandbaby and my wife and my grandson and those types of things. But I am going to so miss the people that I work with. Being blessed to be in education and working within the community, because it really does expand beyond just education. We talk about the commitment that teachers and administrators and our classified employees, all these different folks that have on our community. But as a superintendent, as you know, I work with our city council, our park department, businesses. I've got a great relationship with Providence St. Mary, who's doing some amazing things in community health. And so that is going to be hard to walk away from.
Yeah, I will tell you, one of the things that, and it's a psychological shift, I think, that we need to start getting comfortable with, is that you go from this role that you're serving in, where you have all of this contact with people and you've got a very wide network, and all of a sudden, your world gets kind of small. And my wife reminds me regularly that I'm not in charge of anything anymore. And, and sometimes I have to, and nobody cares about my opinion at this point. Right.
I'm actually looking forward to that.
Right. There is something that's refreshing about that. There's a weight that's lifted off the shoulders for sure. But at the same time, I always like to think, us superintendent types, we're a little bit like adrenaline junkies at heart, right? We like the fast pace of things. We like the interactions. And so things can slow down. And I would say that the advice that was given to me was find something that keeps you engaged and keeps you moving. And that can be any number of things. It can be volunteer work. It can be working with your own grandkids, and, but just, I think, make sure that you stay in motion. That's what's going to get us to the ripe old age of, however long we can stay alive. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, I watched my own father, who, when he retired, did not, he just stopped.
Yeah.
I love the movie The Shawshank Redemption, and I love the line, and you get busy living or get busy dying. And the one thing, you can learn what to do and what not to do when you examine the world. And for me, it's definitely, we're going to keep busy. My wife said I can't work for a year. We'll see after the first month or 2 of me being home, she still feels the same way. But well, no, I plan on keeping busy.
Yeah, I think my wife, married 37 years.
Yeah.
She says, Mike, don't take this the wrong way. I love you very much, but you can't be home every day. So we'll see. I'd love to stay in touch with you and see how that works out. Well, we're coming to the end of the podcast. But David, one of the things I always like to end with is, what's on your gratitude list? What are you most grateful for?
At the end of the day, family always comes to the forefront, but I'm going to extend that to my family that's not blood, which is obviously the amazing people that I've had the opportunity to work for. From my very first year, being a substitute teacher, Kathy Taylor, who was principal down, I actually got to reconnect with her a couple years ago, 37 years ago. Who helped this wayward young man kind of find his way and into a career in education, to all the amazing people that I've worked with in this school district and this community.
Well, there you have it, folks. Another episode of the Superintendent Hot Seat. Today's guest, David Olney. Thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure, Mike. Thanks. It's always great to see you.